Thank you. So in the early spring of last year, I set out to design a train station, a lot like that one. Beautiful, iconic. I wanted to do that. Then I realized that architects have already done that. Pretty good at it, actually. So I asked myself a question. What could I do differently? What could I add to this conversation? But first, I had to learn a lot more about how rail works. This is our current model in terms of transit. People go into a train station, get shuffled around to another train station, they exit to go to work, visit people, go do things and see things and all these other services that they go to. So I thought, why not something different? Why not something where the services are what's moving instead of the people? So you have these train cars, instead of rows of people, you have these train cars that are self-contained programs. These could be restaurants or clinics or whatever else people want to visit. And then they would interface with these programs that instead of a train station, what I call a rail living center. So that people nearby could come to these places, and then they didn't have to travel so far. So how would this system even work? Where would they go? And I did a study. I made this map of the entire American rail system. I realized how incredibly vast and expansive it is, how powerful it is. You can get from one end of the country to the other in 2 or 3 days, or from Minneapolis to Chicago in about 8 hours. Now, in between these large cities, they're all connected by rail lines. There's a lot of really small towns, like really small towns in between. I want to think of a system that could be used that would benefit the larger cities, but also the smaller towns in between. And in this entire network, it's the largest, most efficient freight network in the world, and we use it for that primary purpose. And what could I do for people to use it in a more direct way? I started looking in closer to my own state of Minnesota. And once I had an eye out for rail, I began to see it everywhere. It's like I couldn't get away from it. And I was so curious as to where it all went, who owned it, who was using it for what purpose. And it turns out if you were a town worth mentioning, you had a rail line, or you still do, if you're lucky enough, have a rail line flowing through you. And all the gray lines over here are abandoned rail lines. We've cut back. And I thought that maybe those small towns can revitalize those rail lines and have it be an asset to them once again. So what would we use to shuffle these programs around? Clearly rail cars, but they'd be different. They'd be modified somehow. This is the dimensional standard I decided to go with, was the Amtrak Superliner. It's 85 feet long, 10 feet wide, and 16 feet high, giving you a usable square footage of about 1,200 square feet. And in case you're wondering, that's larger than my own apartment, so I find that to be pretty good sized space. But if you need more, you can always string up a few more. That's the beauty of the rail system. Now, to give you an idea, this is a houseboat in Amsterdam, and it seems to work well for them. So that's about the size that we're talking about. So these spaces can be used for homes or other services, like fine dining. Take, for example, Josh and Sam. They're passionate about food, and they have a great kitchen. And they travel the country, stopping in a few different cities every other week to experience the local cuisine, the local ingredients, and they serve their creations to people around them. Or you have someone like Dan. He's a physical therapist. And what he does is he goes between smaller communities that wouldn't actually have access to the type of health care that he offers. So there's this huge range. And the smaller towns could end up subscribing to this variety of services that would benefit them, from fine dining to cultural things or spas or medical or educational or labs or researchers could go to other places. And the small towns would benefit from this because they would have amenities that normally you would find in a larger city. But the members of this community, the early adopters, the people living in the rail cars would also benefit because they would have a larger audience. They'd be able to change up the market. If they were in a town for a little bit, they could move on to the next town in a few months and come back, or it could be seasonal. But great. So you have this tricked out rail car, you live on it, and you work out of it, and it's your business. But the reality is that most rail industrial areas are really bleak, sad, depressing places to be. And like this, the largest logistical hurdle is that there's no infrastructure for you to get access to the people and for people to have access to your services. You're going to need more. You're going to need a site. Now this Amtrak is in a part of town called the Midway, and it's aptly named because it's midway between Minneapolis and St. Paul. Now Amtrak is moving their services to downtown St. Paul by 2014, so this is effectively a vacant property by then. But I saw this as valuable railfront property and a perfect test ground for what I call the Rail Living Center. Now this is created so that the rail programs that come in technically work, but also have a place to experience these different programs. The people that come in here could use this space to annex extra space. If you're a restaurant, it's where additional seating could be. If you're a shop owner, it's where your storefront could be. If you're an artist, it's where your gallery could be. You could live here for a short duration or long term. It's a place to resupply, restock your goods. More importantly, it's a place for the community to surround. This is a place where all sorts of people can come together and experience what you have to offer. Now, there are different zones inside the Rail Living Center. You have more private areas that allow you to work in a studio or an office space. And there are a lot of retail centers where the storefront, your storefront becomes the facade of the rail car. There's also a residential component. And those green strips literally become shared backyard space. And then you have, on the other interior building, programs that would become next to each other and begin to cross-pollinate. Now, this is a truly, not just a mobile home park, but truly a mobile, ever-changing business district. And you have people on different schedules coming in at different times, either regionally, going back and forth between two cities, or people touring the entire country and making this a pit stop. Now, you have this culmination of ideas, and everyone's here for about the same reason, and you have this exchange going on. And this is where that place could happen. The hope is that this becomes integral to people's lives, that this is more valuable than just the sum of its parts, and that you have this ability to see this value, this infrastructure as bringing these services to you, and that this is something worth investing in. So you have these rail living centers spread all across the country. And it works best if there's a critical mass of these things going on. But in order to be sustainable for the future, we're not going to be running on these diesel engines forever. I thought about how this could serve as a backbone, as an electric rail infrastructure system to supply power to these centers and elsewhere. And then if this power is generated with clean technologies like wind and solar and geothermal, they can be translated to a different variation of this, where the rail cars no longer really need the rail living center and the most essential component, which is to provide energy and water and services to them. But now you have access to a much wider audience, much smaller communities that don't have rail living centers, or communities that have their infrastructure wiped out by a natural disaster. You have these rail cars shipped in and help them out. Now, rail is moving forward. Private rail industries are investing tens of billions of dollars annually to just maintain their operations, but also to foresee optimized demand for the future. I'm saying that this could be a part of that expansion effort. It's a totally new business model, but I think that it could work. You'd have rail companies selling the rail times, the rail slots, but also leasing the space next to the rail lines. And this functions best if you think of the rail living centers as the operating platform, the smartphone, for example. And these rail functions and programs are like apps. And the success of the system is best if there's a large variety of apps, and they all work well, and that they're all appropriate. And it's really only limited by your imagination. I mean, it'd be regulated by third parties, and everything would be safe, but it's your ideas. It could be whatever you want it to be and how it could help other people. So I'm going to ask you, what kind of app would you see yourself using in this sort of system? Thank you.
Amazing, truly.
Oh,
sorry, I
it's
snuck
dark
up on
over
that.
here.
I'm very light on my feet. That's why I got the sneakers on today. Yeah.
Me too.
But one quick question. So do all these rail centers look alike? Are they the same?
This is just a prototype model that I made in this midway. Now, it varies greatly based on the context and the site. I also designed another one in the same cloud that was relevant site, not a center. This is more business-oriented. You wouldn't actually be living here, but you have a closer connection with that community. And it's also a commuter rail center for the Amtrak and the North Star. So it really depends on where you are in the region, how much space you have, and what the connectivity looks like with the neighborhoods. So
Great. Thank you.
thank you.
One more time, please.